now we are going to begin our presentation. We are presenting several, subtopics of our that big theme about ethical issues in specifically in data collection during this digital age. So we will have Pavel first. He's going to present an introduction and case studies on ethical issues. And then we have Gracel. She will talk about informed consent. And then I will talk about public and private spaces and anonymity and confidentiality. Then Jasmin will talk about honesty and transparency. David's part is, there are, I think, four subtopics here: data security, vulnerability, risks, and benefits. Kindly take note of any additional comments that will help us, that will enrich our presentation today, and we will have the question and answer. Okay, now we give the time to Pavel.
Our topic is about online research and ethical practices that are involved. Can you see my presentation, Dr. Arceli? Is everything okay?
Yes.
All right. 1996, when the internet research was just beginning, Rob Kling said, research ethics are normally a specialty topic with relatively little public interest. The time has passed. What do we have today? Research has grown. The new issues have emerged, and the ethical practices, ethical issues is a daily subject of discussion. It's no longer an area of academia only, or medical or biological, bioscience, scientific research. It went public. It went to all areas of our life. If you look through the topics that we are now enjoying during this conference, we can see some new and how many new areas that we can discover through research, especially research online. We have new online platforms emerged. This whole idea of a subject of research, participants, has been redefined by the time and technology. Now we can just have people, represented by their posts in social media, or their avatars, or maybe some groups that are present online. So from physical, we are moving to online space. And ethics, as I said, has become already a daily issue. Today, I would like to just touch on three different cases of ethical issues when researching online. This is not comprehensive cases, but it's some of the cases, just to touch the base. One of them, accessing online data. By the way, all of these cases are real, and this is real studies. This is not made up stories. With an outbreak of the pandemic, most of educational institutions have shifted to online modality. However, not all teachers were prepared for a new, more demanding role of delivering web-based instruction. So the study was launched about the online courses, how they're designed, and how does online teacher cope with this. So what we have is that the study was submitted to an ethics review board, and there was a question raised during the discussion. The study included a review of documents related to an online class platform analytics, class-ready discussions, postings, and course evaluations. So the issue was raised whether researchers have a right to access class analytics, discussions, and postings, as well as course evaluations, without the consent from each student. And it's difficult to get the consent, especially from those who already graduated and they're no longer in the school. So there was a big discussion. Who is the owner of data? Who is the custodian of data? Is a school, or is a person that needs to give informed consent? Or this was new to us as an ethics review board, and I'm part of ethics review board as well. It was a new discussion. The study in this case involves an access to a private communication between the teachers of online courses with the students, and it reveals online identities and also infringing on the basic ethical principle of anonymity and confidentiality. So the main ethical concern in this respect is to protect the research subjects. Additional measures also should be taken to protect the participants from inappropriate linking of data with the unique participant identifiers. So even if we allow this study to happen, we need to make sure that data is de-identified, that the real names will not be exposed in this study. Case number 2, we have case. This is from the book of Dr. David Silverman, Consequences of Sharing Data. It begins like this. I left some research subject with some JPEG digital images, and I had taken from a personal development course. I had research as a memento and thank you. All people in the data were happy for others to share the images in this way. However, some of those photographs were used in a training manual prepared by the course organizers without asking for any further permission. So it was taken for granted that since people have taken these pictures publicly and shared them publicly, they used them further without any other permission. As you know, the data which can be accessible online can be proliferated, and it's easy to share. It's easy to steal, to reproduce it. I remember I read one article about the journey of one interview. How many times the interview online was copied and shared and went public. That is amazing. How we can, multiply data and basically violate the issue of anonymity and confidentiality. The exemplar above presents a new reality when electronic data are easily shared and proliferated. The way the researchers store or share digital data may not be secure enough to protect it from an unauthorized usage. According to the Declaration of Helsinki, at every stage of research study, the researcher is under obligation to observe data privacy to ensure the safety and well-being of the participants. So this is second case. And the third case is about photography online, breaching the ethical, cultural, and religious boundaries. This is taken from the book of Dr. Maria Lagman, 2018. Photography was seen as a graven image, as a commandment, thou shalt not make any graven images. This is talking about a specific cultural religious group, Mennonites and Amish. They do not use photography, but they are highly photographed by the outsiders who other them by romanticizing their culture as quaint and pictorial. So they do not have photographs, but they are being photographed. Now, the person who is reporting this case, she is the daughter of coming from the family of these Mennonites. And she says, many, including myself, would say photos are their most precious items in a home. People increasingly seem to me to be overtly preoccupied with images. Someone who has your image, in a sense, has power over you or has a part of you. These are all reflections I rarely share, since I think my contemporaries would find them to be extreme. But I am sure that they are the source of my reluctance to be a member on sites such as Facebook, and why I limit internet interactions to primarily professional. So the photographs that are shared may also touch some personal feelings, and it's actually violating someone's principles. They really don't want these photos to appear online, but they still appear. The practical implication of these are that one will sometimes find oneself in research situations where photography would violate the norms of the setting or the feelings of the subjects. In such cases, photography should not be done. So ethical consideration also implies respecting cultural and other principles, principles of other people, some cultural groups. Maybe they don't want it to be to appear somewhere else. It's very sensitive. While photo elicitation is an indispensable source of information for qualitative research, one needs to keep in mind that it should be culturally and socially responsive, as it may cause harm to vulnerable communities or individuals. So I shared these three cases. As you remember, one case was from okay, this is case number 1, online data, and then also sharing data and taking pictures. All of this is quite common in online setting. We can encounter it in our own research projects, or we can also add more cases in online data gathering. So today we will discuss about principles that should guide our online data collection methods. Now, Dr. Arceli, I am giving the time to you. And
yes, thank you so much, Pavel. So here now, our focus is on data collections, and we begin with one principle, and that is informed consent. We give now the time to Gracel.
Thank you so much, Dr. Arceli. So part of the ethical guidelines for online data collection is for researchers to ensure that an informed consent is obtained from the participants. We all know that informed consent is one of the cornerstones of research ethics, and it means that participants have been thoroughly and adequately informed and provided with a comprehensive process of information about the research project. And just to give further information in that, we know that it's a process where researchers inform participants about the study, and the participants willingly choose whether they want to participate. And generally, there are 4 components of informed consent. We have information, understanding, volunteering, and decision-making capacity that are also applicable for online data collection. In the next slide, we will see here the guidelines, and these guidelines cover the 4 components I have just mentioned. So number 1 here is that the participants should have the ability to reflect on the information. So the prerequisite here is that complete information must be provided to the participants so they are well informed and they can make intelligent decisions. So researchers must put all the details of the study so participants can weigh the risks and the benefits of the study. The second one is that they make their decision voluntarily without being put under any pressure to participate or make decisions quickly. So this is one aspect that researchers need to be aware about when giving the information. As I understand, when we gather data, most of the time we are pressed with time, but in securing informed consent, we have to give enough time for our participants to understand the information, absorb the information, and make decisions whether or not they want to participate. So number 3 is that they have been given all relevant information on the research and its potential implications. I have already mentioned that when we give complete information to them, they will be able to weigh the risks and benefits and make intelligent decision. Number 4, this is very important, that that participants have understood the information. Understanding is one important component of informed consent. It's not enough to just be given information. Participants have to adequately understand the information. That it means that the information is communicated well and people understand it. The language is clear. There are no hidden meanings. No, I mean, everything, is transparent. And number 5, I think that covers the last component. It's about decision-making component. Participants made a conscious decision to participate and expressed it unambiguously to the researcher. They will make a decision, in the process of securing an informed consent, there should be a communication, the conveying of the information, complete information. And if the participant has a question, clarifications, a conversation may happen. The participant may ask the researcher for further clarifications, and the researcher will be able to give more information and answer questions until the participant is satisfied with all the information he or she needs to know to be able to make the decision to participate or not. So these guidelines also apply for online data collection. So how can researchers obtain informed consent for the data that is readily available online, such as posts on Facebook and other social media apps? We know that we can readily find data. For example, we have a friend or maybe someone we know who has posted something, and we may want to use the information posted. So the question is, can we readily get that information without securing informed consent? We have 3 scenarios here. Which do you think is the best option? Number 1, researchers can inform the group that they are conducting a research on a certain topic and that the information contributed by the group members are relevant to their research purposes. Second here, researchers use the data without informing or seeking permission from those concerned. The third is researchers contact group members whose posts they will use and ask permission. I will leave this to you. I'd like you to analyze this, and maybe at some point later on you'll be able to figure out which is the best option among the options here. And so lastly, in terms of securing an informed consent, let us remember that the more sensitive the topic, the greater the vulnerability of the participants, the higher the need to secure consent, especially for topics that are really sensitive, and the vulnerability of the participants. When we say vulnerable, maybe they are victims of any sort of maybe abuse or or the like, or maybe they are minors. So the more we need to secure their consent. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Gracel. Oh, so this is now my turn, and I'm going to talk about first public or private space, and then the other topic is anonymity and confidentiality. In online spaces, we may say it's public because the fact is the information, pieces of information can be seen by so many people. And usually when there's an online space, those who post there are aware that people whom they know may have access to the information that they post. For example, it can even be like a closed group where people have to register, but yet you know that that group can have many members, and members may not even know each other. And one member may open it and share it with their friends, in one machine, for example. So we are aware that as an online space basically is a public space. However, when it comes to research, we as researchers must ask ourselves this question if we want to do our research ethically. Although I think it should not be an if. It should always be an intentional choice to really conduct research ethically. So in physical settings, the human society has developed the means to define the boundaries between the public and private space. However, in an online space, there is a challenge, to determine whether it is public or private. So in the next slide, we are going to, there are some guidelines that will help us to determine whether the space is public or private. And here are some questions that we will ask ourselves. Number one, is registration required to be part of the group? And if it is, then most likely the group considers themselves private. And we must know that when the space is private, then there are some ethical considerations there that we have to observe, such as informed consent. Why do we have to ask informed consent? Well, logically, yes, because the space is private. Number two, how many group members there are. This criterion, though, is not a very reliable indicator because sometimes the group can be big. Okay, now that is a relative word, but in some places, like you say 500, 1,000, that can be a big group. For example, the Asian Qualitative Research Association, or ACRA, I think we have an FB page, and I think we are close to 10,000 members. And yet we consider that's, to us, we consider that big, but still we are a private group, okay, that is not accessible publicly. Number three, what statements has the group made about their identity and their purpose? Some groups declare what their classification is. Is the group exclusive? For example, they say that this group is only for sexually abused victims, or they say only patients undergoing chemotherapy. In that case, then that space is private. The fourth question is, does the group seek public visibility? If they do not seek public visibility, then that group is private. So these four indicators may help us decide whether the space is public or private. And again, what to do when it's private, of course, we have to ask informed consent. Next slide. Okay. The next topic is anonymity, and usually anonymity is paired with confidentiality. What does anonymity mean? Well, it means that it refers to the guarding of the identity of research participants. Guarding means we are careful that our participants cannot be identified. some of our participants may want to be identified. And in that case, yes, we can disclose. But based on our experience, most participants do not want that their identities are revealed. So we are going to learn how we are going to observe anonymity. Next slide, please. Okay, so yes, in online research, it is difficult to ensure anonymity of the participants because the sources of direct quotes can be easily traced with the use of search engines. We are referring here particularly to qualitative research, which is our specialty. I mean, like for ACRA, that's what we do. We advocate qualitative research. And one characteristic of qualitative research is thick description. And to provide thick description, researchers, especially in the presentation of findings, use direct quotes to show really that our participants are real people who were subjected to certain situations and they underwent, you know, certain emotions, certain thoughts. And so to ensure also credibility, that's what we do. We include direct quotes from our participants. Now in an online, when we harvest data online, and then while we hide the identity of our participants by, yes, using pseudonyms or maybe hiding other identifiable elements. But when we cite the quotes, what happens is that because the data is online, if it is searched, you know, using online engines, then there is high likelihood that the direct quotes can be discovered and traced. And there, in the direct quotes, of course, there are names of those who said those quotes can be identified. So that's the challenge. It's difficult to ensure anonymity. So what do we do? Now, there are ways to do that one. One strategy is called fabrication. What is fabrication? Fabrication is, you know, what we do as researchers is we present the data in a composite manner. I will show in the next slide what that means. So composite, it's like we do not link a direct quote to one participant, but rather we present this one in a composite way so that the specific who said the specific statement cannot be traced anymore. Or also, we can present the findings in a general way. In the next slide, I will show to you a sample of a composite data. This was a study that I conducted with my student. We did, our study was on graduate student mothers. These were students who were taking PhD, and yet they were also mothers with small children. So what we did, by the way, the design that we used was portraiture. Portraiture is a design where we paint a portrait in words, and also in our study we even use drawing to also paint our participants. Now we got statements, significant statements from our participants, and then we put them together to form a poem. So you see, this one is images of the present and the future. This is part of portrait making. Okay, so remember, I want to reiterate that these words were not our words. These were the words of our participants, usually actually phrases. So being a smart student, being a loving wife, wife with courage, being a homemaker, mother with love, being a fulfilled woman, woman of faith, doing the will of God, being a powerful woman, among the best, a leader, being a wise woman, making good life choices, being an organized, multitasking person, being a model to our children and other women, living a legacy and a heritage, living a happy and full life. So now this is now composite. It's like one put together, but actually coming from different participants. Next, this is the same in the same study. To conclude our study, instead of making, a paragraph, a conclusion in paragraph form, we did a poem, but still this one is a description of the different participants put together, so that it's like we are describing one woman here, but actually different participants. So this is an example of composite data presentation. She is, by the way, the study is titled the Portrait of a Superwoman, Finding Balance and Compatibility Between Graduate School Work and Motherhood. So this is the composite description of Superwoman. She is the woman in the classroom, her fingers dancing in the keys or caressing forward brows or tracing blurred lines. She is the woman in the home, her hands soiled or burned or simply full. Next slide, please. She is the woman before the cross, her knees bended and calloused, her head bowed. She is the woman whose heart's embers ever glowed in the ebbing and the heaving of life. Next slide. She is the woman who daily basks in the warmth and freshness of love's race, in the strength that flows from vein to vein. She is the woman whose hands are clasped in the strong and firm grasp of life and strength and power, in the presence that is ever near, in the love that is ever real. And we ended with one word: she is the Superwoman. Okay, so I hope you learned something from how to present data using the strategy called fabrication, or presenting the data in a composite manner, or showing general findings. Okay, the next issue, confidentiality, ethical consideration, or ethical principle, is confidentiality. Now, confidentiality means only those whom they have authorized can have access to the data. In our informed consent, we disclose there who only can have access to the data. And usually we say only the researchers, and sometimes we include, if we have research assistants, or if we are doing thesis or dissertation, we can also disclose there that we also include there our thesis or dissertation committee. So in making our confidentiality statement, we disclose who are those who will handle the data, not only during data collection, meaning who are present when we gather the data, but also who has access during data analysis. So also that we disclose that, we promise that during the data collection, we ensure that only the participants and the researchers are present. This one is especially true, and we have to observe this when we are doing data collection, shall we say, we are doing interview through Zoom. And how safe will our participants feel? Now, for some researchers, they show the entirety of the room. they show that they are the only ones there. Or if ever they have a research assistant, they also disclose this, that with me today is my research assistant. There's one team of researchers. They learned, a very important lesson when one day they were doing the interview and they were doing that one online. And I think they were doing this camera where there was the tripod. And when they did not notice that somebody came in and then that person passed in the front of the camera, and the participants saw that there was another person in the room. And so out of that experience, the researchers suggested that we who do research online should lock our doors, and or we say that online interview going on or something like that. Okay, so we have to be very careful, and also not only the researchers to disclose, who are present, even the participants, I think, should also inform the researchers who are present. Next slide. Okay, researchers should never discuss their data when non-team members are present, whether they are doing this, okay, the data collection is online, whether they are doing this online, or maybe this in their physical space where they have to be sure that they protect, privacy. And also even the debriefing sessions should be held in a private space. Researchers should not in any way, I'll go back to number 3, and I'll emphasize this debriefing to be done in private space. Now, why is that important? Because you see, it's not only our participants who are online. There are also times when we researchers, we come from different places, maybe different geographical locations, and our debriefing sessions are done through online, through Zoom, for example, and we have to be careful that we observe confidentiality and privacy here. Number 4, researchers should not in any way share their data with any person, even to those who are close to them. And when doing data collection online, that can be a challenge because sometimes we are doing our interview in our bedrooms, and maybe our spouse, is there. We are doing this in the night, especially, or when we are doing this in an office and there are those who are sharing our space. So that one is a challenge, and we should be very careful that we observe confidentiality and privacy. And there's a question that I will pose here. I do not have the answer. We do not have the answer. But this is something that we may want to consider. How about if legal authorities demand that researchers share with them the data? And this can be true not only for online data, but even for data that we collect in traditional manner. Okay, so next slide, please. We are now on our next topic, that's transparency and honesty, and we now give the time to Jasmin.
Thank you, Dr. Arceli. Well, transparency and honesty are ethical research principles that call for an ongoing reflexive dialogue between the researchers and participants about the privacy, anonymity, and other ethical issues. This includes disclosing to the participants some pieces of information prior to data collection and communicating the results of the study to the participants. Next slide, please. Specifically, this ethical practice involves revealing to the participants prior to the data collection the researchers' identity as researchers and their research affiliations, if any, especially when they join the group of research for research purpose. Roberts 2015 gives example of researchers who created deceptive identities to gain access to data, which is a breach of the principles of honesty and transparency. Now, second is what online data the researchers are harvesting and for what purpose. in the online space? Are they going to collect text only? Are they going to analyze also the images, videos, and other documents that should be communicated to the participants? Third is the research methodology, how the data will be gathered. Are they going to observe forum discussions in the online space? Are they going to record the online interview? And if they record the interview, how will they store the data and protect the confidentiality? So that should also be communicated. Who has access to the data? If they have advisor or a team of researchers who help in the data analysis, let the participants also be aware. And then the fifth is roles of the research assistants. If they involve research assistants, it is important to disclose their roles. Are they just assisting in collecting data, or will they also have access to the data? Glassmeyer and Dibbs 2012 share that even though only one of them was seen by the participants in the camera at the start of the interview, the researchers should inform the participants that there was another researcher who's taking down notes, for example, about the interview. So these are some of the pieces of information that should be disclosed to the participants prior to the data collection so that they can manage their expectations about the privacy and other ethical issues. I know this list is not exhaustive. Other information might need to be disclosed depending on the type of the study. On another note, the participants must also exercise honesty and transparency as they participate in the study. After the data collection, transparency and honesty are exercised through member checking and reflexivity. Member checking is about verifying the data accuracy. Here, after the data is collected, the participants should be able to see the data and check it for accuracy. It is when the researcher, for example, sends the transcript of the interview or the report to the participants to verify if they are correct. And during the member check, the participants may delete or add some data. Reflexivity is about questioning own assumptions. It is necessary for qualitative research because in qualitative research, the interpretation of the findings may be subject to the researcher's personal bias. We know that. So reflexivity is the process of reflecting on researchers' own values, beliefs, and life experiences, and identifying their potential impact on the study's outcome. Through reflexivity, the researchers exercise transparency by revealing their personal bias and the protocols that they follow to minimize its potential impact on the study's outcome so that their report will reflect the accurate interpretation of the data. Okay, so I have just mentioned some of the ethical practices which uphold the principles of transparency and honesty, and note that these recommended practices may also apply to other types of research conducted online or offline. Now, some of the researchers, although they are aware of these ethical research protocols, they express that they also face ethical dilemma when trying to uphold transparency and honesty. For instance, in the case of researchers doing ethnography in the online space, the question is how transparent they should be in revealing their identity as researchers. Ideally, we know that researchers should be upfront about their identity as participant observer in the online space. That is number one in what I have presented earlier. However, some researchers who followed the ethical protocol expressed that they experience unwanted consequences. And here are a few of those cases. I'll just mention, it's not in the slide, but I'll just mention case one. First case, one researcher tried to maintain an overt open presence by using his real name and revealing his affiliation in the online social space, which he was observing. But later, he realized that it left searchable digital traces to his institution, the project website, and the online social space where he entered. So his desire to be open and honest with the community had jeopardized his desire to ensure anonymity of the participants. So being transparent also led to, very much transparent, led to, compromising another ethical principle, which is confidentiality and anonymity of the participants. Another case is a study of internet dating and mail order marriages. Here, the author entered the online setting for research with the approval of the moderators of the group. And after lurking for a while, the author introduced herself to an internet list where she hoped to carry out research into correspondence relationships between American men and Filipino women. Upon revealing herself as a researcher, she received negative responses from some of the members. Some called her to explain and defend her research goals. Some even got angry and demanded her to leave. So in the end, she just decided to leave the setting and lose the opportunity given by the gatekeepers. So her attempt to be transparent also caused disruptions in her research plans. So these are examples of the challenges faced by researchers in trying to be transparent in the community. This is why some researchers carry out covert observations, like they try to hide their identity and try to establish their ethical stance in relation to different aspects of their research. Philip Jenkins, for instance, in his book, Beyond Tolerance, tried to justify the procedure that he followed in his research on child pornography by explaining the basis of his ethical stance. First, the method of his research. He tried to justify that his research is observational but not participatory. So even if he entered in that site where there is online child pornography, he's not participating. And second, the nature of the research environments. He tried to hide his identity because of the nature of the environment. It's dangerous and deviant, therefore unworthy of privacy protection. Next is the technological affordance of the internet, which enable a certain filtering of content. So he justified that he disabled the automatic pop-up of images or videos so that he cannot see those. And also his research questions, explained that his research questions did not require him to look at the visual content of the sites. And he also justified based on the legal issues that the study raised. So here in this presentation, I have laid out the ideal practices that should be followed when conducting a research and the reality of the research activities in the online space. It just shows that sometimes some aspects of research limit the researchers from faithfully following all suggested protocols, and the researchers try to justify their ethical stance. But of course, their justifications of their ethical stance are also subject to criticisms by other individuals. The question is it defensible on ethical grounds? In the end, I will say that it's still better to take the safe ground. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jasmin. And we have one more topic, and that is data security, vulnerability, risk, and benefits. And let's listen to David.
Okay. Anyways, our next talking point or issue that we're bringing here is data security in research. With the increase in online research activities, it seems that we are more prone to more and more threats in the integrity of our research data. Some of the more popular threats that we are seeing, according to Mumford, are the various tracking technologies, contiguity and traceability, and loss or proliferation of data. So why do we do data security, right? Well, the why is simple. It is just ethical, right? It is ethical to protect our participants from undue harm. This is because our participants can be harmed if their personal data becomes available to the public. So if their personal data becomes available to the public, there might be harm. So what is personal data? So Personal data only includes information relating to a person who can be identified or who are identifiable directly from the information in question, or who can be indirectly identified from that information in combination with other information. So there are three things here, right? Identifiers, direct identification, and indirect identification. Let's look at those three things. First, next slide, please. Okay, so identifiers. So identifiers, well, these are the usual suspects, right? We all know this. It's name, ID number, location data, or some online identifiers such as IP addresses, cookie identifiers, and so on, right? There are some other special identifiers, yeah? According to the UK General Data Protection Regulations, these are some of the special identifiers. They are special because they can be sensitive to certain person or persons. This might include race, ethnic origin, political affiliation, genetics or biometrics, and or sexual orientation. So these are some special identifiers. So those are identifiers. Next slide, please, Pavel. Yes, next slide, please. So then we go to identification. There are two types of identification, right? There can be direct identification. There can be indirect identification. What is direct identification? Direct identification is if by looking solely at the information you are processing, you can distinguish an individual from others. That individual will be identified, or we say identifiable. That is direct identification. Then there's also what's called an indirect identification. An indirect identification is you don't have to know someone's name for them to be identifiable. It's a combination of other identifiers, and those combinations may be sufficient to identify that individual. So knowing that information that you hold combined with other information may indirectly identify an individual is essential for researchers. So we must be really careful to when deciding the data that we're going to present, because when combined, they can be indirect identifications. That additional information may be information you already have from another source, information that you hold, or it may be information that you need to obtain that can help someone identify your participants. So now let's go to some data protection principles. Now, these principles was adopted from the UK General Data Protection Regulation. It is in the UK's Data Protection Act of 2018. So while we might not be in UK right now, or we might not be under UK laws, but I believe these principles, if applied well, can help our research practices to protect our participants. So these are the 6 data protection principles: lawful, fair, and transparent, purpose limitation, data minimization, accuracy, storage limitation, and the last one would be integrity and confidentiality. Let's go through them one by one. I believe my fellow panelists have touched on a couple of them. Let's go to the first one, yeah? Lawful, fair, and transparent. Lawful means informed consent. You got the consent from your participants. In the Information Act, there are many items that made it lawful, but I think the one that applies to to us researchers is that there should be an informed consent. A fair means that you must not process the data in a way that is unduly detrimental, unexpected, or misleading to the individuals concerned. Right? That's what fair means. Transparent means you must be clear, open, and honest with people from the start about how you will use the data. I think Jasmin touched on that a bit earlier, and I think Arceli did. Okay, that's here are some quotes from different researchers about transparency, right? Honesty and transparency involves revealing to the participants what online data and this data the researchers are harvesting and for what. Yeah, researchers should reveal their identity as researchers. Yeah, that's by Clark and 2015 and Feltzman 2013. Yeah, here's another one from Salmon's 2015. So that's the first principle. Yeah, lawful, fair, and transparent. Let's look at the next one, the second principle. Purpose limitation. You can only use the personal data for a new purpose if either this is compatible with your original purpose, you get a consent, or you have a clear obligation or function set by law. So you can only use the original, you can only use the data for the original purpose that was intended when you collect the data. You must not use it for other purpose. If you want to use it for another purpose, you basically need to get another consent, right? So that's called purpose limitation. Next one is called data minimization. You must ensure that the personal data that you are processing is, one, adequate, sufficient to properly fulfill your stated purpose. You know, sometimes we feel that if it's not adequate, then it's okay. But it's doing your participants an injustice if you don't finish a research, right? You've collected data from them, taken their time, you know, several interviews, then the group discussions, focus group discussions, you know, they spend time with you and you do not produce anything. So make sure that it's adequate. And make sure that the data you collect is relevant. What relevant means is that it has a rational link to that purpose. You just don't collect any data. Yeah, sometimes when you collect data, you talk here and there, you know, suddenly your transcript is your transcription is 400 pages long because you like to chat with your participant. No, that's not the right way to collect data. You should only collect relevant data. Okay. Then the third one is limit to what is necessary. You do not hold more than you need for that purpose. Yeah. Limit to what's necessary. So that's data minimization. The next one is Pavel, next slide, please. Accuracy. Yeah. You should take all reasonable steps to ensure that your data that the data you hold is not incorrect or misleading as to any matter of fact. Yeah, you should reflect the data in your research. Do not mislead people. You may need to keep that data updated. Well, although you know, it depends on what you're using it for. If you finish with your study, probably you will not be updating the data. But before you finish your study, you should try to keep it updated. If you discover that the data is incorrect or misleading, you must take reasonable steps to correct or erase it as soon as possible. Yeah. Next slide, please. So here are some quotes. Yeah. After the data is collected, the participants should be able to see the data and check for its accuracy. So it's member check, right? During the member checks, the participants may delete and or add some data. See, as researchers, we should always remember that participants have rights too, you know. There are many rights that they have. So they have right to access, they have rights to rectification, they have rights to ensure, rights to erasure, they have rights to objections, and they have rights to restriction of processing, right? It means that anytime they want to opt out of the research, they can, they can. So those are some of the rights. So next one, our fifth element is that storage limitation, storage limitation. You must not keep personal data for longer than you need it. You need to think about and be able to justify how long you keep the personal data. This will depend on the purposes of holding the data. And you need a policy, basically. When you start your research, you need to make a policy on setting standard retention periods. So how long you'll keep the data. And you should also periodically review the data you hold and erase or anonymize it when you no longer need it. Anonymize it when you no longer need it. You must carefully consider any challenges to your retention of data. Because why? Because your participants, those participants have the right to erasure if you no longer need the data. So don't keep their data forever. You need to erase it at one point. That's storage retention. And the sixth one, sixth principle is that of integrity and confidentiality. I think my colleagues have discussed this, but then the gist of it is that you must ensure that you have appropriate security measures in place to protect the personal data you hold. Make sure you know how to protect the data. Don't just go on collecting data without having a way to protect your data. So those are the 6 principles of data security, which is lawful, fair, and transparent, purpose limitation, data minimization, accuracy, storage limitation, and the last one is integrity and confidentiality. So now let's look at some things that we need to look or we need to consider before we collect data. So this is divided into four parts, which is collection, use, retention, storage, and destruction. So before we collect data, this is what we need to look at. So let's look at the first one, which is collection. Collection. So these are things to consider when designing your collection method. So these are questions that you need to ask. So Gracel and Arceli ask you questions without answers, so I might as well do so. So here are some of the questions that you need to answer before you start, before you collect. How will the data be initially collected? Will this be on paper or electronic? Will you be taking audio, video recordings, or will it be photographs? What devices will be used? How will this be stored? So that's the things that you need to think about before collecting. When using data, these are the questions that you need to ask. How will the data be used? Will it be identifiable, pseudonymized, or anonymized? Will the data be shared with others at your university or those at other institutions? In what format will it be stored? How will the data be published? Will individuals be identifiable? So that's when you're using the data. On the retention side, retention and storage, here are some questions. How and where will the data be stored and archived? Will you use a central repository and make the data openly available? Will you be retaining contact details to provide them with study summary or to invite them to take part in future study? Where, when, and how the data will be backed up? Will the data be stored securely? Who can access it and how? How will you archive your data at the end of your project? All right. So that's the fourth one. Fourth one. The last one is about destruction. When you finish with the study, when and how will the data be stored? So those are the questions that you need to ask with regards to one, collection, use, retention, storage, and destruction. By answering these questions, you can start to formulate a data protection scheme for you so that you can be, so you can protect your participants better, right? Well, all of this might seem to be a lot, yeah, when you're starting your new research, especially if you're a novice researcher like I am. So here are some simplified guidelines, yeah, some simplified guidelines to data security, yeah. One, all tracking information and web signed consent form will be stored in a secure server separate from the study data. Two, electronic data, including all forms and storages of data, will be password protected. Right? Data is stored separately from participants' identifying information and linked only to a unique subject identification number. And if you're working in a group, preferably only one person knows the process of pseudonymizing, right? We did research with the Ukraine humanitarian work a couple of months ago, right? Even I don't know who is who, yeah? I did the interview, but when the transcription comes, well, you know, I don't know who's who. I think only Pavel knows the pseudonyms of the people there, right, Pavel? So I think that's a good practice, yeah? That's a good practice. You know, yeah, make it harder for people to link the research results with who the participants are, right? So, so next one is data is anonymized at the early stage of the study. Yeah, as soon as you get the data, as soon as you get the transcription, anonymize them. Non-anonymized data should be deleted as soon as possible. Right after you anonymize them, and you basically delete. Yeah, the encryption software should be used to create encrypted spaces. Right. Next one is the number of data copies is minimized. Yeah, minimized that's basically to reduce proliferation, right? And minimize the number of people you have, people who have the key to pseudonymizing, yeah? And the key should be stored in a separate location from the data. So those are some simple guidelines, not much, right? So it's not hard to go through them. So back to you, Dr. Arceli.
So yeah, I'm excited discussing this topic. We have so many areas to supervise and to see. Actually, online area has you know, it's a multifaceted area for the ethical part, because we have many challenges, unique, I should say, unique challenges. When we just look at the regular ethical practices in face-to-face data setting, data collection setting, we cannot just transpose those principles to online. There is much more involved in an online setting. As we see, it takes more, let's say, discernment and more careful approach. So the swelling internet accessibility coupled with growing digital literacy presents unprecedented research opportunities by providing new forms and sources of online empirical data. Researchers can access online posts, discussions, chats, videos, photos, and many other forms of data. At the same time, we need to understand that in online research, we have many ethical principles overlapping. As we mentioned, several of them that while trying to keep one, you may violate the other. So we need to decide and consider everything together as a whole, the whole study. For example, in the case of dealing with private data, it is essential to find out who is the owner of the data, a person or a group. Privacy or publicity of the group also take effect on the issue of anonymity and confidentiality. Meanwhile, the nature of the study may be related to sensitivity and vulnerability, which should be also reflected in the informed consent form and in the degree of safety measure attached to the study. So the principles are really overlapping each other. So to finalize, ethics in qualitative research during the digital age is an emerging practice. We need to understand we don't have answers for everything, but we are also looking for those answers, and we are also checking our ethical practices together. Researchers' understanding of what is ethical and what is not ethical is evolving. As digital capabilities in terms of devices, the software and application upgrade in a blink of an eye speed, so do ethical considerations evolve in unprecedented fashion. Considering the many forms of digital data takes in the diverse ways by which it is collected, ethical challenges vary in scope and degree. Ethical decisions are not easy to make. The lines between and among the choices are blurred. Hence, we suggest that instead of formulating fixed ethical principles and demanding strict adherence to them, as researchers, we instead attune ourselves to ethical compass and become responsible moral agents who are committed to behaving ethically. More so, we continue to the conversation among ourselves as we explore what is ethical in the small and big moments of our research journey in this digital age. This is the end of our presentation.
Okay, so we would like to invite our attendees here to kindly write in the chat box or raise your hands. And meanwhile, while you are doing that one, I would like to say and comment on, I think it's David's part when he spoke about relevant data. When doing that in traditional research, I'm referring to like a face-to-face interview, or maybe even online interview, that one is quite easy to control by, you just ask the right questions and ensure that the questions you are asking, the data that is provided to you will answer your questions. In an online space, I'm now referring to, shall we say, you are opening Facebook pages. You see there are all sorts of data. Some of those may not be related or relevant to your research questions. And therefore, be very careful that, what you harvest are only those that are related to answer to your research question. We have a question here. I'm sorry, I may not pronounce your name correctly. Yvonne? Yes, please, you can speak.
Yes, thank you so much, Arceli. And thanks for the opportunity to take part of this panel. It was very clear, the presentation, all of them touching the very, very sensitive topic is to develop a research, online research. It's quite challengeable for us that we are offline research. We have to learn how to deal with this field, this field work. I have two questions, and I would like to clarify. When present the transparency and the honesty, it seems to me that you talk about, I don't remember the name of the presenter, the speaker. I think that's Gracel.
Jasmin. Yes, Jasmin.
Okay, and the transparency and the honesty. It seems to me that there are 2 points here. One is a methodological challenge when you are talking about how to manage, transparency and honesty from the data you collected. And the other point is the transparency and honesty of participants in an online area, in an online space. I'd like to hear more about this difference between transparency for a researcher and for participants. That's the first question. And the second one, I would like to hear from you if someone have an experience to work with children and adolescents in online space as a participant of research. I don't know if
Okay.
I'm here, but if you want more explanation, I can go through.
We will
Thank
try. We will ask Jasmin. Min, did you get the question?
The first question is, you're asking about, is it the difference on the transparency of researchers and the participants, if I get correctly?
Yes, she's saying yes.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, in my presentation, I have discussed the transparency of being a researcher, because ideally, the researcher should reveal that he's a researcher, and then also his affiliations, if any, and the participants has the right also to know whether they are being observed, if they are participating in the research, and of course, if it will be published in a public paper. So that is part of being transparent, letting the participants know, giving them this pieces of information about who he is or what he's doing, what kind of data they are collecting, and for what purpose, and what methodology, so that these participants will also manage their expectations about their privacy, anonymity, and the like. Transparency on, you mentioned about transparency of participants. I mentioned about this also, that they're also expected to exercise transparency and honesty. For example, when conducting interview, the researcher may ask some questions, so they are expected that they provide answers based on what is true. So that is transparency and honesty on the part of the participants.
Okay, David, you want to say something?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question. I think the second part about the transparency of the participant. I think Dr. Martin Tolik touches on that idea that we should also try to coax or try to make sure that the participants also are transparent. And one way that he suggests that we do that is try to make sure that they feel safe, or they're in a safe space. That will help them to be more transparent. Usually people are wearing masks if in public spaces, but when you ensure that they are in a safe space, they tend to be more transparent. Of course, we cannot force them to, because it's voluntary, and they can opt to retract their consent. But yeah, one way to do it is to try to make a safe space for them. I think that's yeah. So making safe space is a tricky thing, right? We should first show that we are transparent before they feel that they are safe. Yeah, and fortunately for online researchers, it is sort of easier to make them feel at home, because they're actually at home. When we are interviewing them, they probably are in their bedrooms or in their offices, where they know the space, they are comfortable in that space. So I think there's a benefit on the transparency side from the participants if we're doing it online, because we're not full frontal with them. Yeah, but that's just a feeling. I think it needs to be researched more whether participants are actually more transparent in online interviews than not. But I think that's my take on it.
Actually, David, you are right. There are some authors who say that participants may even reveal themselves, more of themselves, in an online space. And now I'm thinking that there are actually different types of online spaces. One type of online space is, yes, gathering data through Zoom, okay? So we have this interview, it's sort of face-to-face, only that we are not in person, we are not on site. But this one is digital, this is still online. This is one way to do that. But another way to collect data, because our presentation is more of collecting data, another way to collect data is just, to harvest. And we say harvest, the data is already there. Like one example I can think of is an FB page. And I usually think of the ACRA FB page where we post something there and then there's a thread that follows. And sometimes we post a question and then a thread follows, many answers there. And a researcher comes in and harvests, this data. And that is like ready-made data. Another way that I'm thinking is that you create a group chat, and these are all your participants. And you post maybe one interview question so that instead of doing this synchronously, like through Zoom, you do this asynchronously. You post this one, and then your participants, write their answers there. So there are ways, and I think these different ways of doing that may call for different approaches also in terms of ethical practices. Now, thank you so much. We go to the next question.
Pavel is wanting to add something.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I think Pavel wants to add something.
I'm just talking about
we have one question.
Oh, yes.
Pavel, yes, please.
About children online. Yes, we need to consider two things, I think, here. First of all, children may not necessarily be the best source of verbal data. They are not mature enough to express themselves verbally. So they may give you more information by some other means, like photos or emojis or other creative ways of
arts-based. Yes, arts-based. Mm-hmm.
Children are easier to express themselves different ways. Also, we consider as minors, the parents should be involved and maybe even present during the interview or any other ways of data collection with them. So there are actually two informed consent forms. We need the parents to sign and also the children to sign. So it's like
Thank you so much. And I hope, Yvonne, we have answered your question. There is something here in the chat. Let me read the chat. Okay.
Maybe I don't know. Yeah. She says our participant says children are very competent to express their views freely once they understand the research and indeed the process. It can be the case, yes, but we may not expect them, because normally what we do, we prepare our research questions and then interview questions, and they are, mostly for adults. And if we do it,
so I think, Pavel, it is in the way we also ask our question. Yeah,
right.
Our questions should be worded in a way that that are clear and plain to the children. And yes, for children, I do agree, we can interview them verbally, but also we may consider also using arts-based data. I remember several studies, like for example, there's this study on children in war-ravaged countries. The researcher, I think she did also interviews, but in addition to that, they did something very creative, and the researcher asked the children to make masks. Yes. Yeah, also to draw and let them take the pictures and let them explain the meaning. I think in that way we like encourage them to speak, I would use the term richly. I'm sorry, our time here in my timepiece is already 8:59, so we have 1 minute to go. So we would like to thank everybody for joining our panel discussion. Thank you again and again. Our heartfelt thanks to WCQR and our colleagues here, and thank you for sharing your ideas. We have learned also things that we haven't known before. Yes, paintbrush that's very nice. Yvonne, thank you so much. And we can continue. I hope we can continue our conversation. Accra also has a colloquium we hold every twice, a month, every second and fourth Thursday at 5 to 6. So tomorrow we will have one. We would like to continue engaging with you. So blessings to everybody.